32-year-old Tiffanie Lucas is being held on $2 million bail, accused of the shooting and deaths of her sons. How does this happen? Hi, I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers. What a heartbreaking case that has happened on November 8th of 2023. Just what a case.
Yeah, so for those of you who are unaware, the way that we found these kids is that a neighbor suspected that something was up. A neighbor went in and finds these kids shot and bleeding on the floor, and then we take the kids to the hospital, and they died in the hospital.
So it is a tragic, tragic case. Actually, a neighbor had heard or had a sense that something was wrong and went over, and the sheriff's department also went over, and that's when they first walked into the horrible, horrible scene. And Bullitt County Police said that officers responded to the Shepherdsville, Kentucky home around 11 o'clock in the morning and found the two boys shot. Deputies said they were found covered with blood in a bedroom, and an arrest citation said a gun was found on the bed. We are seeing now a picture of this mother, Tiffanie Lucas, and the two boys who were 9 and 6. They had actually gone out trick-or-treating just a week before all of this happened. You know, neighbors said that, you know, they saw the kids playing in the yard. They saw them trick-or-treating. In any event, they had been found by the neighbor and by police at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday. They were taken to the Norton Children's Hospital, where at 2:50 p.m. They underwent emergency surgery, but both of the boys did, in fact, pass away from their injuries. The boys, again, were 6 and 9 years old. A police report showed that Lucas was arrested and charged with murder after witnesses told police she was the shooter. The motive behind the incident remains unclear. It is a little bit strange that some family, I should say some neighbors, were somehow involved. There were somehow some witnesses. We don't have a probable cause affidavit or anything like that at this point. But that is an unusual aspect of the case, is that some neighbors apparently were the ones that were able to tell police that they heard something. One of them knew that something was wrong. So the boy's mother, 32-year-old Tiffanie Lucas, does stand charged with 2 counts of a Class A felony murder. Judge Jennifer Porter stated that the court was finding her to be a danger to others and ordered her held on $2 million bond. So when this type of thing happens, obviously the thing that people ask is, how does something like this happen? What kind of a motive can there even be?
You know, whether you think it's mental illness, just pure evil, combination of both, you know, pick your poison. None of it's good. The result is horrific.
How do you even explain something like this? But, you know, again, it's speculation. But he was saying that there can only be one of 3 possible things: mental illness, pure evil, substance abuse, one or a combination of all of those things. And by the way, court records did indicate that Lucas had been previously arrested for drug possession, and she had spent a month behind bars. So this is a story that doesn't have a lot other than that behind it at this time. It was an ending that people in that area just had never expected to hear. Just days earlier on Halloween, the boys were seen trick-or-treating. An event the mother posted all over her Facebook page, which was still up as recently as a couple of days after this event. And that's where we were able to get some of the pictures. Some of the neighbors said that it was a very good neighborhood. People often say that after these events. They said they didn't know the family personally, but said they saw the 2 boys playing outside as recently as the day before this happened. Investigators and police were roaming the streets, creating a scene that neighbors just were not used to. Emergency radios captured some of the horror. One of the emergency radios, we don't have the tape, but the radio said, quote, 2 juveniles laying on a bed covered in blood. There is a gun on the bed. Male is breathing. There's a shell casing on the bed next to the gun. And all of that apparently was, again, discovered by someone that lived nearby. So now Lucas is being held at the Bullitt County Detention Center. Her two boys, who, again, were known to play in their neighborhood, are gone from the yard and the sidewalks. It leaves the community wondering, why? Just why does something like this happen? What was she thinking? How did she get to the point where this was at? Was there no help for her? Did she not want help? I mean, as one of the neighbors pointed out, it's clearly not right. Do people that are at the end of their wits' end, do they just not know that it's coming and this happens suddenly? Or do they know it's coming and they just don't know what to do? I mean, so many questions and no answers,
Yeah. And I'm glad you pulled up the slides, because one of the things that I noticed in the slides, which doesn't necessarily need to correlate with this case at all, but in this picture here, especially that, I'm assuming this is one of the ones taken from her social media, you can see her face is completely photoshopped, just flat and lifeless, and she's removing all of her features. And, when you see in the contrast with her kids, you can see the kids still have definition to their face. And it's not uncommon for people that do things like this, practices like that, to be very dysmorphic and not realize, what people actually look like, that we're not just like drawings. So when you say, like, was she at her wit's end, just because someone photoshops their picture doesn't mean that they're going to turn around and commit atrocities. But at the same time, it's a little bit sad, because when you see someone like that, in my opinion, they're a little unwell, because why do you feel the need to change yourself in that many regards? And in this picture, you can see there's actually a lot more definition to her face. She smiles, and you said, like, do people realize that they're in this decline? She had been charged with, having drugs and things like that.
How does anyone know in advance if something like this happens in your neighborhood or with a friend or a classmate or anything that? What kind of clues are there for people to see in advance? I mean, this is a case that's similar to ones we've heard about in the past, where people say, "Oh, they were great people. They lived in a nice neighborhood. They seemed normal." Now, one of the relatives, one of her husband's brothers, actually said after this happened that he had seen some problems there. There are reports, unofficial, but there are reports that they had been reported to an agency that had looked into it, and they were off the radar. So if people scratch their heads and they say something is wrong here, how do you know in advance? How do you know in advance that someone is just gonna do something like this? I hesitate to use words like flip or do something like this, but I'm almost speechless, which, as you know, for me is pretty rare.
I think that, like, a big issue behind cases like this, like you mentioned that, like, a relative was aware. I think in scenarios like these, one of the major issues is that and this is not always the case, but that this person potentially doesn't have a good support system that knows them to that level. So a lot of people can kind of put themselves together in the face of public, but unless you're spending, even 20 hours with a week with a person isn't really enough to know what that person's doing in their day-to-day life. So that's why you have these people that are, like, married, and it's just like, yeah, they come home, see their wife 5 hours, and then they go to sleep, but they have whole other days. So I think that, like, there's signs that people can be unwell, but in a lot of those situations, when you see someone's not doing well and someone's being destructive to themselves or others in any way, doing drugs, a lot of people can resonate with addiction. A lot of people have addicts in their life. You have this person who you see is hurting themselves, and it gets to the point where if you get too close to them, your relationship with them will sour, they'll start hurting you. So you kind of pull away. And I think that's one of the ways the situation gets so bad so much quicker. And we don't really know all the details with what happened with this woman and her family. But it's very easy to spiral out of control. And I think, like you mentioned, it's like, I don't think these people realize it. And I think the people that are there to see it pull themselves away because when it reaches the point that it's negatively impacting them, and then don't know how crazy it spirals. But that's just my theory.
There's one case that's still pending on the South Shore of Boston in the town of Duxbury, Massachusetts, where in early 2023, a woman by the name of Lindsay Clancy, allegedly, of course, who had 3 children, strangled her 3 children, ages 5, 3, and 8. Again, allegedly, she is said to have strangled the 3 kids with exercise bands. And then she herself jumped out the window only to have her husband come home a little while later, find her on her back in the yard, asking her where are the kids. He went inside, he called 911, and there's actually a tape of him going through the house, finding the children, and him just, screaming in anguish, finding he had just gone out for takeout. When he came home, this had all happened, and he found the kids. 2 of them passed away right away. One of them, sadly, hung on for a few days and then passed away. And their defense attorney, a very well-known Boston area defense attorney by the name of Kevin Reddington, was quoted as saying that this woman, Ms. Clancy, had been prescribed dozens of psychiatric medications in the 3-4 months before this happened. So, it raises a lot of questions. Did the drugs help, or did the drugs make her do it? Did the drug, so, I mean, you talk about the issues that these people might have, and maybe they do seek help, but does the help or make it worse? I mean, what else can be done? Especially in a case with a child, it's, a lot of the cases we talk about are awful. They're horrible. We use words like macabre. But to me, I don't know, when it involves a child, that just makes it all the worst. I think you feel the same way.
Yeah. And it's really like, and I'm assuming a lot of people watching this feel this way right now, where it kind of makes your skin crawl, because it's like, you can't even imagine taking an exercise band to like the neck of a human, even a stranger. So to imagine doing it to your own kids is someone that's in just a completely different universe mentally. And you mentioned like that they had been on all these different prescriptions and how that may have impacted it. It reminds me of a personal anecdote that when I was in high school, I forget what it was, but I had been prescribed an antidepressant, and that antidepressant made me hallucinate and see fog in the hallways of the classroom. Yeah. And it's like a medication. I forget what it's named, but it's like a very common one. I don't know off the top of my head, but so for a lot of people, they have positive results with that, but every human has such different mental chemistry, where something that might really benefit one person, another person takes it and their brain's just short circuiting. So, yeah, and exactly. I think, it's really sad.
It is sad. This actually happens a lot more often than you would think. Of the history of cases like this, which are called filicide, by the way. That's the word for parents who are accused of or who are found guilty of killing their kids. We can go way back to 1994. Susan Smith drowned her 2 sons. They were 3 years old and 14 months old. She drove her car into a lake with her kids strapped inside the car. She had been dating a man who did not like kids. That predated this. Then in 2001, there's the case that I think a lot of people remember. Andrea Yates drowned 5 kids in the bathtub of her house. She was convicted of, I believe, 3 of those. That conviction was overturned, but right after it was overturned and they let her out, she went into a psychiatric hospital where she remains to this date.
Let us know if you want us to explore that one a little bit, because I have not heard of that, and comment if you think that would be a good video and we'll do one on it.
Then there was Christopher Watts, who strangled his wife and smothered his 2 daughters. This is a horrible case. Celeste and Bella were 3 and 4 years old. He dumped them in an oil tank, and he buried the wife. He did end up, Mr. Watts, pleading guilty, and he's now serving a life sentence. And the last one I'm going to share now, because there's just so many of them and it's so horrible, is Chad Dorman. This just happened in January of 2023. He shot his 3 sons, aged 3, 4, and 7, in his front yard in Ohio. One of the boys actually tried to get away, and Mr. Dorman actually chased after him and shot him. And the thing, all of this is alleged, of course, but the terrible thing about Chad Dorman is his wife tried to stop him, and he shot her in the hand, so she survived. Mr. Dorman shot his 3 sons, and he had a daughter, and she got away. So the daughter survived, and the mother survived. But so this happens more often than one would like to think. I remember back during the Murdoch trial, and as I've told you before, I watched pretty much all of it, gavel to gavel, except trying to continue to practice law. I would go home at night, and you could watch a lot of it. A lot of it was on YouTube, so you could watch it. And you know how YouTube has, you know, when you watch something live, they have those little chats on the side. Well, during the trial, people were saying, I can't believe he's guilty. I can't believe that he shot his own son, because that was the charge of which he was convicted. He shot his wife, Maggie, and his son, his adult son, Paul. And people said, oh, I just can't. No, I think he's innocent. I just can't believe that he would shoot his son. Well, unfortunately, these things do happen, and it's just, you know, it's distressing, and as you said before, it's kind of difficult to handle when you see that it is a child that's involved in one of these cases, you know?
And I think that, you know, you brought up some good points where it's just like, what are the warning signs, or could it even be a medication? And like, we think about things like, it makes me, and Alzheimer's, for example, is something that can happen a lot earlier in people happen a lot earlier in life than what people realize. But, you know, psychologically, we think about, you know, people have loved ones with dementia and how they become someone you can't recognize at times, and just all these other things. Borderline personality disorder, where you might see someone as completely normal and it turns out they're snapping behind the scenes. It's so hard, and it kind of reminds me, like with alcohol, how you have these people getting, you know, driving under the influence and getting in trouble for things like that, and people drinking, and, you know, maybe they think that they're fine to drive when in reality they're not. And it's like, you have these people who may think that they're doing okay, and, you know, they have some kind of underlying mental snap. Another thing, you know, when I worked in the service industry, people would brag like sometimes about like getting like 5 hours of sleep a night and being fine off of that. And it's like, you really should be trying to get sleep. You should be trying to eat healthy, and you should be trying to take care of yourself. I think that a lot of the times our society is very go, 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 and we don't really realize when we're crumbling under stress. And I can't imagine how these people commit atrocities to their own children. And I'm sorry, anybody watching this might be a little bit of a hard episode to watch. It's like, some of these things, like talking about them makes me nauseous, like to even imagine. But it's just like, you don't know. Somebody may look fine, but you never know what's going on.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point, that stress is another thing. The law enforcement officer that we quoted earlier had mentioned 3 factors. One was she may have had a drug history. One may be mental health. And, one might just be evil. There are evil people. Stress. We're all under so much stress. People are under so much stress, especially if you have kids like those 2 cute little boys there. I mean, you know, it's no easy task to raise kids. It's no easy task to have children who, you know, they have their school needs. They have to be transported here and there. They need clothing. They need food. They need, you know, a lot of things. They want to be with their friends. They want to play in their yard. They want to, you know, do a lot of things. And so it is a stressful thing. And, you know, a funny thing, no, it's not a funny thing. A thing that people say is that you need a license, don't you, to drive a car? You need a license to fly an airplane. You need a license to, in many states, have a gun. You need a license, you know, to have a drone. These days, if you want to buy a drone, you need a license. You don't need a license to have kids. And, you know, if you go through a divorce now, at that time, you've got to go through a parenting class. There's a, if you file for divorce before they'll grant you the divorce, in most jurisdictions, the ones I'm familiar with anyhow, you won't be granted your divorce. Even if everything else is agreed upon, you won't get your divorce unless you finish a parenting class. And it's well intended so that the parents realize that our relationship is over, but our relationship as parents to these kids is not over, and it has to continue, and we have to continue to be responsible. But before people have kids, there's no license, there's no class, there's no nothing in, you know, I mean, I've never heard of anything like this being taught anywhere, really. I mean, first of all, I don't know how you teach it, but second of all, maybe people should figure it out, because as you pointed out, not me, it adds a lot of stress, and it is a lot of stress, and we're all under a lot of stress already, especially these days with everything that's going on and social media, and there's so much traffic out there. I mean, I don't know. You raised a good point.
Yeah, well, you even raised a good point how you said that you don't need a license to have a kid. And I think that's such an important part to stress, because a lot of the times we forget that the environment that we grew up in is not the environment that other people are in. So a lot of the time, a lot of people will think, oh, you know, you're supposed to get married and have kids and have a family, and that's great, you know, if that works out for you. But a lot of people, you know, maybe they try to start a family too young because they're enamored with this idea, and the only environment they've ever had is people screaming at each other, and they don't know how to be a support system. Yeah, it's like some people are able to evolve out of that. Some people have really good friends and stuff like that, and you can learn that you can treat others with compassion and talk things out. But, you know, I mean, almost everybody can relate to having a parent, no matter how good your parent is, at some point your parent has said no and screamed at you for something unreasonable. Usually, I'm not going to say my mom is the same, but my dad is trophies. But it's just like a lot of the times, people don't actually have an accurate image as to what a healthy family is. And when you have kids and when you have a relationship, there's always going to be those disagreements. And a lot of people, especially in a post-COVID world now, I'm sorry to say the C word, but we were in a situation where we were so socially isolated for so long. A lot of people don't know how to work out their differences, and a lot of people don't know that you can solve a problem without screaming. And I have a friend who's always texting me like, oh my God, it's 3 a.m. My roommates are screaming. I have a test tomorrow. It's just like they need to break up because they just fight every day. And there are couples out there who are fighting every day. If you're fighting every day with your, you know, partner, if you have to yell at each other or slam doors, you need to learn on some communication and social skills. And in those pictures, it's sad because it does look like she's having a good time with her kids. Obviously, like I said, you can't see what's going on behind the scenes, but you can still have a parent that is, you know, fully convinced that they love their kids and that they're doing the right things for their kids. And then they're still smacking their kid across the face and screaming at their face and telling them to shut up, you know, and it's just like, oh, but I still love my kid. And it's, some people don't know what it's like to be a compassionate person, and that the classes, you know, it would be great if people could have, if there was a way for everybody to have a little bit more communication classes and working on relationships and treating people with respect. Commenters, treat us with respect.
No, you're right. And, you know, people will get to commenters in 1 second. I just wanted to add one thing. People will comment that, you know, we don't know what we're talking about. We weren't there. You weren't there. You're not in Kentucky. You don't know her. You don't know her background. All of that. Sure, it's true. I'm just going to say one thing. And if you don't like it, comment. Drugs are a terrible thing. All right. They're just a terrible thing. So you mentioned comments. So let's take a look at some comments that have been made about this case with other YouTubers. Let's go over some of the comments that have been made about this case. One was that I went to middle school and high school with her. This is insane. She was the sweetest girl ever. She had a effed up childhood. Her dad cooked meth in her home and blew the house up. Not that that excuses her behavior, just gives some insight into her background. Now, we don't know if that's true, but that's a comment. That's a comment that's been posted. So I think you have one there, don't you?
Yeah. So the one that I have here is, quoting, this is not me. I'm a mother. I'll protect my son at all costs. This woman doesn't deserve the title of a mother. She's a monster. How can you do this to your own child? This world is so sad anymore. RIP to these two angels. It's hard. It's incomprehensible. Like, people are even saying, like, this is heartbreaking on every level, and it's accurate. It's like, how does this even happen? The average person, nobody can imagine doing this.
And then the final one we're going to read, and again, folks, we're just reading comments that are out there. We're not saying any of this is true or otherwise, but these are comments that are out there on this case. The final one we're going to read is, quote, the family had called CPS, which is Child Protective Services, several times over concerns for those kids. So, that gets back to something we were saying before. That may well be true. That may well be true. We don't know. We have no idea whether that is true. And we also don't have any true, what are they going to do? There's a case that you just kind of mentioned, and we'll talk about it more in the coming months. Harmony Montgomery had been the subject of the social workers, and the Massachusetts courts deemed that her father should have Harmony, even though he had quite a history, and Harmony ended up dead, and he will be on trial for murder. And that's all we can say about that at that point. So that's my closing thought, that even sometimes if people do have concerns, what is there that can be or is done?
Yeah, and just for my final thoughts and closing statements too, I do want to say that just because someone is abusing substances, that doesn't make them inherently a bad person, and they may do some horrible deeds and become someone who they aren't. I know, we're in the New Hampshire area, so if everybody has seen how the state of Manchester and the epidemic going on there, and I'm sure a lot of people have loved ones who have experienced these things, and thankfully some people are able to overcome, and some people are able to achieve sobriety and live successful lives, and be people that are trying to atone for their past. So it's just bad luck and bad circumstances that some people get consumed by this. Some people have mental breaks, and at the end of the day, all we can do is try to be empathetic humans. Obviously protect yourself, but understand that people may make irrational decisions when they're not in a rational mindset, and that doesn't excuse the behavior, but other factors can be at play. But we really appreciate everything that everybody has been commenting, and we do appreciate any commentary and criticism, and it is really nice reading what everybody has to say. So thank you guys so much for that.
Yep. And if you have any comments, criticisms, we do read them all. Please let us know what you're thinking. Subscribe, and please press the like button down below, and let us know if there are other cases, because we are looking at a ton of cases. Sadly, not me, but an author who's out there who writes true crime said that true crime is a growth industry, and it's an unfortunate commentary on our society. But thanks for watching. Have a good one. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.